Good afternoon, welcome to UK Column News. It is the 19th of February 2015 and it's just gone 1 o'clock. Myself, Louise Collins, Brian Gerrish and Nick are here in a very wet and miserable Plymouth.
We are indeed. Meanwhile, in the rest of the country, it looks either wet or dull and overcast, and it's particularly dull and overcast in Peterborough. We will be mentioning Peterborough shortly in relation to Peterborough private profit-making Sodexo prison and the incarceration of child abuse whistleblower Melanie Shaw. You're starting with the NHS,
yeah,
I think.
Brief one, this one. So payments to private healthcare firms are up 50%. 6.6 billion was taken from the NHS to cover payments to private healthcare firms, and Shadow Health Secretary Andrew Berman is claiming that the NHS will sink into a toxic mix of cuts and privatisation, just as the UK column has been saying for the last 2 years.
Well, it's coming to fruition pretty quickly now. Of course, lies from the Conservatives, from the Lib Dems and Labour, NHS being privatised in front of our very eyes, except they just continually deny that it's happening. We'd like to thank all of the people within the NHS who've been passing us information. We do appreciate that information coming through to us, and we will do our best to publicise what you're telling us, which is an increasingly brutal management regime inside the NHS. And of course, everything is around targets and profit, and huge amounts of money being hoovered out by the drug companies.
And you've also got the people that are getting re-employed. They're getting laid off and then being re-employed. They're getting massive payout salaries and then getting re-employed back in again.
Yeah. Well, this one's fascinating.
It's a bit sad, actually. So, Lake District, the National Park are selling off the Lake District, thanks to Ollie for this story. They're selling it off, and they are blaming budget cuts and that strict planning regulations will apply to the new owners. Locals are concerned that if more than 100 acres are sold off, there will be public access. Maybe their public access will be restricted, and land may not be maintained, and buyers may try to build on the land. In total, 7 plots are listed up for sale. Pretty tragic.
So, and we think this tracks back to Agenda 21.
Yes, definitely.
So we're going to stay on the trail of the Lake District. It'll be interesting to see whether local papers, some of the NewsQuest papers, actually pick up on this and start to report what's the true political agenda between everything from what's going on in the Lake District to the selling off of woodlands across UK.
Exactly.
Well, your favourite person, Louise, over to you.
Yeah. I'll try and keep professional about this one. You just couldn't really make it up. Tony Blair has only gone and got himself another job. This time it's with Serbia. Yes, the same Serbia he bombed whilst he was Prime Minister. But apparently picking up Blair's fee is the United Arab Emirates. So let's just get things straight. Blair has now been advisor to the following countries: Rwanda, Albania, Mongolia, Kuwait, now Serbia. His African Governance Initiative has been working with Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea, Nigeria, Ethiopia and Senegal. But apparently the Serbian president, Alex Vučić, actually wrote a book about Blair back in 2005 called English Gay Fart Blair. I've tried looking for this book, but I can't find it.
And that's reported in national press.
That is being reported in the Daily Mail and the Guardian and the Telegraph.
So we've got this extraordinary situation of this man. Where does he get his power from? Did a fantastic job of the start of the destruction of UK. And now he's advising the world on everything from how to run your country to spiritualism. Well, if Blair is not in the real world, let's come into what is certainly the real world, and Nottingham and child abuse. And thank you again to a viewer who alerted us to this remarkable BBC Nottingham story, where finally they've decided to report some of the truth. So here we are: Nottinghamshire care home abuse not investigated, claims social worker. And in the story it says, police failed to properly investigate allegations of sexual abuse in Nottinghamshire children's homes, a former senior social worker has said. Now, of course, Melanie Shaw also stated that Nottingham police had lied over Operation Daybreak, claiming to have interviewed witnesses that they had not. The BBC continually failed to report anything to do with the testimony of Melanie Shaw. But this particular social worker said reports she made in the 1990s was simply not believed because of the children's backgrounds. And then it goes on to say she made 3 complaints as recently as the early 2000s after children disclosed sexual abuse to her. The difficulty that we had was that the residential staff would deny it. They would provide alibis for each other, she said. The children or the young people, where are they going to go? Even if we move them on, the staff moved around. So once again, we've got in-your-face testimony of people talking about child abuse in Nottinghamshire, and the old story, of course, with the police, simply no interest, no investigation, and therefore nothing to see, no crime. Well, we'll give you a bit more because the BBC suddenly decided to go pretty big on this story. So go and have a look and see the full text yourself. But basically, they're now saying that Operation Daybreak could involve about 150 children with complaints going back to the 1960s. The Force said it was one of the largest criminal investigations in its history. Paddy Tipping, who is the Police and Crime Commissioner, was a social worker in the 1970s, and he was interviewed as a witness in December. And we're going to be coming back on to Mr. Tipping fairly shortly. And of course, the councils, Nottingham City Council, Nottingham County Council, desperately working to buy off the victims with £250,000 worth of public money. Well, here's Paddy Tipping's comment in this article. Historically, victims haven't been listened to enough. And we go on here. We're just highlighting that he was interviewed, Paddy Tipping was interviewed as a witness in December 2014. We understand that Nottingham Police have interviewed another former head of children's services, and we believe this is to do with, unlike Mr. Tipping, this other interview is to do with crimes allegedly committed, but it appears there is a total blackout on this mysterious person by Nottinghamshire Police, the Nottinghamshire authorities, and indeed BBC Nottingham. But let's have a look into this very murky situation in Nottinghamshire and some quite remarkable information exclusive to the UK column. We can tell our audience today there was a discussion with Paddy Tipping. He had his chief executive, Kevin Dennis, with him at the time. Let's have a look at what was being discussed. Well, this relates to essentially charges against Melanie Shaw, and this is the start of the trail. It was revealed by Mr. Tipping that the charges against Melanie Shaw, let's remember she's in Peterborough Prison at the moment, are of false imprisonment of an individual, offences under the Communications Act, and breaching her probation order. But according to Nottinghamshire Probation Service, they have confirmed that Melanie Shaw has not committed an official breach of her community supervision order. Furthermore, they go on to say, whoever is saying that Melanie has breached her community order has made a mistake. And clearly they're unhappy about this. They say that the charges against Melanie in any case would not lead to a custodial remand, but Melanie has somehow appeared in prison. And they end up by saying we, so this is the probation service, are working on a revocation of the present charges. So we simply ask, are we dealing with mistakes, confusion, chaos, or is this the police lying about how these charges were produced against Melanie and how she got into prison? Well, one of the key Nottinghamshire police officers who is certainly covered by the BBC is Superintendent Helen Chamberlain of the Nottinghamshire Police. And we believe that this is the lady who would have released details of the probation charge against Melanie Shaw. So it's not clear whether indeed it's Superintendent Helen Chamberlain who's made a mistake. These are some of the things she said to the press as head of public protection and Operation Daybreak. We're dealing with potentially over 150 victims. Much of the information recorded at the time has been destroyed. I think we've heard that sort of thing before. Suspects have died. And then she says that basically the police are not overwhelmed by the scale of the inquiry. Well, UK column asks just what child abuse information was destroyed and by whom. We ask why Nottinghamshire police have forced entry into the home of a child abuse whistleblower and terrified her. And we're now going to ask simply for the truth about the latest raid on the home of Melanie Shaw, the charges that have now been laid against her, and how, if these are non-custodial charges, how we have this child abuse victim back in a particularly brutal profit-making Sodexo prison. So there's something rotten at the heart of policing in Nottinghamshire. No statements in the press by Chief Constable Chris Eyre. What do you make of it?
Wow, shocking. Well, it's all shocking, Brian. It's every day there's a little bit more to show the evidence of how corrupt this country is. Not just the police. There are good police officers out there, but embedded within every police force, there seems to be a dirty mob.
A dirty mob, and they are prepared to victimise child abuse victims in order to make sure they keep their mouths shut. Yeah. So let's remind ourselves of what Nottinghamshire Police did when Melanie Shaw was on her probation order, a community order with the probation service. And here we are. So Nottinghamshire Police, of course, forced entry into Melanie's home, a gang of 5 very big, heavily armed police smashed their way through her back door, absolutely terrified her, and then simply left her alone in a house where she couldn't secure the property when she went to bed at night. Now let's remind ourselves of what Paddy Tipping has said. He said historically victims haven't been listened to enough, and yet we have Nottinghamshire Police not only taking a statement from Melanie, which started Operation Daybreak, now looking at the abuse of 150 children. What do the police do to this woman? They hound her, harass her and terrify her before another raid of this type, which puts her in prison. This is horrific. This is the real state of Britain in 2015, and we have to balance the rest of the politics in UK against this benchmark. Well, remind ourselves of other areas. So we've got this sort of headline a while back from the Times: police still dismissing child rapes and sexual violence as non-crimes. And then, of course, we can come in at the other angle, where if we follow, this is Thames Valley Police and a BBC story. Well, of course, who are the paedophiles according to the BBC and the mainstream press? Well, the only paedophiles are Pakistani, are Asian. Well, this is not the evidence coming to the UK column. The evidence coming into the UK column and many other alternative media outlets is that the paedophile rings are certainly being controlled by the British establishment and political establishment, and the people in the prime positions of control are indeed white. And we'll just reinforce this message. Here we've got Top Constable Sarah Thornton, Common Purpose Leader, Chief Constable Thames Valley Police, Vice President of ACPO. But when an Asian gentleman comes forward talking about vile sexual abuse of children at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College, the police simply refuse to act on over 80 reports of abuse of youngsters, and they stand idly by as this man is hounded out of his job and victimised. Accidental? We don't think so. This is the top level of Britain's police forces simply covering up pretty unpleasant child abuse.
Yep.
So, who's running the country? Well, here he is, David Cameron. We've said the empty head of British government. Clearly his tummy is not empty, in this picture at least. But this is the state of the country. This is the state of the men who are looking after security. They can't identify paedophile rings connected to government. We've got a picture of Sir John Sawyers, head of intelligence, on the beach. This was released on his Facebook page, or his family Facebook page, I think. And that was a little bit of a mistake, because obviously he's a secret person. Or we could go to this level. We've got Sir Alan West, playing a pirate in positions of power, also security advisor for the government. If you don't like him as a pirate, you can have him as James Bond. And presumably these are the people that we should trust with our security. It's difficult to comment, isn't it?
Words fail me.
Well, Sir Alan West has been very outspoken. Let's remind ourselves that when this questionable video of an execution was circulated, Admiral Lord West of Spithead said he wants the British accented extremists to appear in The Hague and be tried for war crimes. We don't know whether he was actually talking about Tony Blair at the time. Maybe he gets it right some of the time. But our question for Lord West is, where does paedophilia and blackmail appear on the list of priorities for national security? Well, would this man know? Let's remind ourselves that he was court-martialed for losing papers while walking along a canal path with his dog. He was reprimanded, but that expired, allowing him later to be promoted to flag rank, senior rank in the Navy. And he is a remarkable man. He's looking at counter-terrorist policy, cybersecurity, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear security, science and technology for countering international terrorism and guidance for local government in enhancing the security of crowded places. It's difficult to repeat it all because his remit has been so wide, but apparently all of these people simply unaware of the paedophile rings operating in Britain's major cities with direct connections to government. That's because they're spying on us.
Yes,
over to you.
They are. Okay, so have you checked your privacy settings on Facebook recently? Well, you should. Facebook's Deep Face is now appearing in most people's settings. The program is said to match a human's ability to remember a face. Developed in Israel by a professor at Tel Aviv University, it started off as just a research program, but now seems to have taken the extra step. Algorithms developed by Yahoo Laboratories and Stanford University can now identify faces from all angles, even if the face is half covered up, it's upside down. So just a bit of a note there to people just to go and check your, I think it's tagging, photos and tagging, and go in there and check that this hasn't been turned on. Mine is not there yet, but many of yours may be, so just go and have a look.
Can we just gently say for Britain's security forces that if you are confused at the moment, I am Brian Gerrish, and I'm using my normal face, and Louise Collins is sitting here with me. So there we are. We've saved all of that effort by what is it?
Being honest, telling the truth.
Tel Aviv University,
yes.
And we'll continue smiling. Gaslands.
Okay, so this is a funding project for the professional editing of a documentary. It's by the producer from The Truth Behind the Dash for Gas. It's already working on the project, but the remainder of the funding is going to be needed if they're going to complete the project by mid-March. The documentary is going to be an open source and will be available for groups to use for raising awareness of the Australian experience in fracking, and what Brian Monk goes on to say is you don't live in a gas field, you die in one. So far, £900 has been raised so far towards the target of 2,500 through donations from private individuals in East and North Yorkshire. £145 has been raised via GoFundMe, and therefore there's still £1,455 that is required to ensure the documentary is completed and released by mid-March, especially they want to get it released before the election. And, you know, Ian Crane, I just want to sort of reiterate to people, Ian Crane has given up most of his life to dedicate to making people aware of fracking. I know personally he's a good friend. I helped him move out of his home. He now lives on the campsites around the country where he tries to raise awareness, and he's lost his businesses, he's lost everything, and he is now out there on the front line
for this cause.
And people really need to understand that if the fracking ends up going ahead more in this country, we're all in serious trouble. So if you can, I know people are always asking for donations, but if you can help Ian in any way, and the guys for making this film, as I say, groups will be able just to have it free to show at events, etc. Please go to the GoFundMe page. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're also going to say, if you're worried about the state of the country but you want to do something about it, what better place to be than at the end of this month, 27th of February through to Sunday, 1st of March, the British Constitution Group, the UK Column Joint Conference at Telford, where we are going to be talking about the state of the nation, and we will be giving you in a second the speakers. We've got some amazing information and evidence coming together, in particular on the scale of the child abuse in UK, and of course how the system is covering up to protect paedophiles in the establishment and the political arena. And we'll be promoting just what the plan is to deal with that paedophilia at the highest levels of British government. So do come along. Details are on the British Constitution Group site. Advert we'll put on screen for you now, and then I'll talk about the speakers.
It's the time for action. The UK Column and the British Constitution Group present their Spring Conference 2015. The networking starts Friday evening, 27th of February, running to late Sunday evening, 1st of March, at the Park Inn, Telford, Shropshire. On-site accommodation available at special rates. Visit www.events.gb.com now and grab your tickets. UKC and BCG members, check your own websites for discount rates. Go on, do it now. This really is the time for action.
Well, okay, there we are. That's the little video for the conference. But what about speakers? Well, we think we've got a pretty comprehensive lineup. So we have Ian Puddick, who is well known in most circles. Of course, he had his business and life destroyed by corruption up amongst London police. He's going to be talking all about the police and corruption. Mike Robinson will be talking about the attack on our constitution, and in particular what we are calling the constitutional reform agenda. We have got Justin Walker talking on the Bradbury, engage the enemy more closely. There are solutions to the corruption in the international banking cartels, and the Bradbury is clearly one of those. We have David Kameh, who will be talking about the true source of spiritual law, common law in this country. John Witterick, Nature of the Cage. He's going to be talking about how the system has closed in around us, financial debt, etc. We have Field McConnell, who will be coming across from America to talk about the situation in the States. Vinnie Byrne coming across from Ireland to talk about all the good work which is bringing people onto the streets in Ireland to express their unhappiness with everything from water to repossessions.
Vinnie of People's Internet Radio.
We have Mark Salon, who will be talking about the response groups, Guy Taylor, who will be talking about corruption in the courts, and Michael Doherty, who will be talking about his own experiences in the courts, and in particular what we can do about it through the route of private prosecutions. We will also be having, to lift our spirits, some music, and of course we have Alex G, who will be running 2 special editions of Doomwatch. So we think it's a pretty special package, but the meat of it will be people giving real information, real experiences about child abuse in children's homes across the UK, and we will be revealing in great detail just how the British establishment and political establishment has been working for years to cover the systematic abuse of children. So if you haven't booked yet, get on to the UK Column or the British Constitution Group website, or www.events.gb.com and book your place. Yeah, we would love to see you.
UK Column BCG members will be getting discounted. So if you're not a BCG member, go and join up, or UK Column.
Why do we need to deal with these subjects? Well, let's come back to the news being reported really by the hour. This is to do with a release by Tom Watson MP, and he's saying on a blog, are executives at the Telegraph sitting on emails that may help the police inquiry into child abuse. This was reported by Guido Fawkes as well, and in it there's some pretty interesting comment. It's to do with an exchange of emails between senior figures at the Conservative Central Office who were apparently speculating about which Labour sitting MPs were paedophiles and how the Conservatives should deploy this information. Now, of course, this is pretty heavy stuff. A lot of people could say, well, this is just allegations and innuendo. But remember, of course, we recently had Peter Oborne resigning from the Telegraph because he said the Telegraph was not reporting the truth. It was being effectively pressurised by the likes of HSBC Bank and others. And now we've got the Telegraph back in the frame, being accused of sitting on information which could help the police root out paedophiles in positions of power. We've got another website here, Pride's Purge, and sorry, I've got trouble with that one. Irreverent, thank you. Well done, Louise. Look at UK politics. And here we are, how the Telegraph execs tried to stop Tom Watson's MP's inquiry into paedophilia. And in this text it says they, and this is referring to Telegraph executives, they tried to pressure Mr. Watson into stopping his inquiries. So is this just tittle-tat and nonsense, or have we now got something fairly serious starting to come into the public domain? I think I know what it is.
Yeah, me too. Who owns the Telegraph?
It's the Barclay.
Oh, it's the Barclay brothers. Of course it is. Yeah.
It is the Barclay brothers. So lots of questions to be asked, and of course many people point their fingers at the mainstream press and say, well, okay, who really owns these newspapers, and how much pressure do they put on editorial teams not to tell the truth? Of course, The Guardian is included in that. Well, on this subject, the Telegraph.
Yeah, this is actually an old story, and I can't remember what date it's back. It's back, I think, a year or so ago. Councillor David Fuller, who last year was the topic of mainstream media articles over holding sex parties hosted by a dominatrix in his home in Fareham, Hampshire. Well, he is now running for councillor. He's running for mayor in Portsmouth, and apparently the Portsmouth City Council members have voted unanimously in favour of Fuller's bid. What do you reckon?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that the LibLabCon agenda is for the legalisation of paedophilia. I think that's what is they want in this country, and therefore you're going to gently nudge people into the sorts of behaviours and practices that it's going to help this along. So with a very cynical, let's get him in there. I mean, you know, we've got enough problems already, but clearly he's the man who should be
sorting Portsmouth out.
Sorting Portsmouth out. Well, while all of that is going on and we're seeing the utter breakdown of the political system in UK, the BBC is well on its way to stoking up World War III. So we've got BBC News, RAF jets scrambled after Russian bombers were seen off Cornwall. In the article it says the Russian planes were escorted by the RAF until they were out of the UK area of interest. At no time did the Russian military aircraft cross into UK sovereign airspace. And we'd just like to say that we did call the MOD and ask what the definition was of the UK area of interest. They said it was related to controlled airspace. The point we were making is were the Russian aircraft in international airspace or not? And clearly it appears that they were in international airspace. So the Ministry of Defence seems to have made up a new term as far as controlled airspace is concerned, which is called the UK Area of Interest. And if you wonder what the highlighted section on the tail of the aircraft is, we just draw a certain amount of amusement by the fact that it appears to be, I think, a Bear H aircraft on loan to the BBC. So it clearly says BBC on the tailplane there. So a little bit of humour, but the BBC says we should be very frightened. Well, let's have a look at what else they say, because Jonathan Marcus, BBC Defence and Diplomatic Correspondent, here he is. He is often linked with very high-level press briefings with NATO. But this is the sort of thing being reported in the article. On the same day, Defence Secretary Michael Fallon warned that Russia's President Putin posed a real and present danger to 3 Baltic states. So we have the Russian aircraft appear, and what does the BBC do? Say, this is connected to the Baltic states. Mr. Fallon's, where are we? Here we are. Mr. Fallon's belief that there is indeed a potential threat to NATO territory, in particular the Baltic republics, widely shared, hence NATO's desire to underline in the most emphatic terms that its security guarantees to its members will be honoured in full. And my goodness, it goes on more. When asked about the prospect of a new Cold War, he said, it's warming up. You have tanks and armour rolling across the Ukrainian border, and you have an Estonian border guard who's been captured and still not yet returned. So the BBC, with Mr. Fallon, absolutely ramping up the rhetoric against Russia. And of course, no mention of those falsified pictures which purported to show Russian tanks on the move, but were in fact years old from another conflict zone. Well, we thought we'd just highlight this. The Huffington Post, and in April last year, well, they were using exactly the same picture of the same aircraft, but this is what interested us. There was some comment. 6th Squadron Typhoon pilot Lieutenant Gary Montgomery said, Typhoon quick reaction alert stands ready to scramble at a moment's notice, and they intercepted 2 unknown aircraft approaching the NATO air policing area. Well, the bit we're really interested is what he said later, because he said this: intercepting Russian Bear aircraft is a routine occurrence for us. It's what we do to maintain UK sovereign airspace. And so there is no mention that this is something unusual. And here we are back in April. Now suddenly the BBC is trying to terrify the British public that we are rapidly approaching World War III. Yeah. It's paid for out of our licence fee money. This is the worrying thing.
Well, if you've got a TV. Can I just say, I think Frag was hit the nail on the head. They were flying over to pick up the UK column stream, and they used the BBC logo to get past security.
Well, that could well be true. Or indeed, maybe the BBC have hired these aircraft. It's difficult to tell. We're going to say, let's remember what we reported yesterday with regard to the Royal Navy chasing a Russian warship in the Channel. The Express said that the UK was on alert, but the MOD described the operation as pretty routine. So here we've got the same thing, but we've got a laughing Cameron at the bottom, because whilst the Russian warships are crewed by Russians, we now know that the Royal Navy is being crewed by gift aid. So these are people brought in from overseas because we're so critically short of vital engineers in the Royal Navy. Presumably Cameron has been spending too much time at his black and white
ball
dinners. Yeah. So here he is, David Cameron. We're also going to remind ourselves that he said we need another 5,000 troops to keep us safe from the Russians. And we say, does this man think we're stupid? We just asked the question, has all common sense gone out of the government? And I'm going to say, has David Cameron really got a brain where military matters are concerned? I don't think so.
But he's collapsing.
He's collapsing. He's collapsing.
And so now he needs, he's taking money out of it. His troops are being let go of, aren't they? They were. Yes. Right, and now he's saying he needs 5,000 more.
Well, this is true. This is playing with the minds of the general public, but the game is to decimate British armed forces so that we have to rely on the French and the European army system. And then with your other hand, you ramp up the rhetoric against Putin to get people frightened that there's going to be a massive Russian invasion. What is he trying to do? He's trying to lock Britain deeper into the European Union, in my opinion. Well, he's doing a good job because lots of money rolling in.
Yeah, £40 million has been given to Cameron and his Tory party since 2010. Private dinners for 45 elite businessmen have been held by the Cabinet Minister and Cameron. They're known as the Leaders Group, and they have collected over 40 million since 2010. The Leaders Groups are made up of hedge fund bosses and millionaires, and these leaders are the same people who Cameron has given tax cuts to, according to John Ashworth, the Labour Shadow Cabinet Office Minister. It has also been leaked, guest at the Tories' black and tie white ball, bid to go shoe shopping with Theresa May, big them shoes, and this must be a joke, jogging with Education Secretary Nicky Morgan. Well, yes. And but the Leaders Group get to have more intimate dinners than just your average donor, and they're more intimate dinners with Cameron and Samantha and Cabinet Office officials.
So we'll say to that, do you really have any wonder why the country is in such a state? Country is being broken apart. We've got incompetence, we've got arrogance, we've got egos, but behind it all, of course, is a political agenda. And we bring you back, if you want to understand more about that political agenda, come to the UK Column and BCG conference at the end of the month. And a comment on the North London children case. We know that there's a great deal of debate over the internet at the moment. This is the young boy and girl, 8 and 9 years old, who are on video talking about the most horrific sexual abuse and the murder of children. We've pointed out that senior police officers were threatened and warned off getting involved in this case. And we've also reported, of course, the Metropolitan Police have claimed that after a period of time in the hands of social services, and indeed with contact given back to people the children said were abusing them, that the 8 and 9-year-olds have, quote, retracted their statements. So we've reason to believe that there is going to be an attempt by the authorities to prove that what the children said was all sort of made up on the spot. People who've watched the videos, of course, say this is impossible. The children are describing sexual practices in great detail. They're describing people's bodies in great detail, birthmarks, tattoos, and other skin blemishes. All of this in great detail. All the police would have to do is bring in a number of individuals for interview and examination, and that will be the end of the case. We understand that the mother at the moment is now desperately concerned for her safety, as threats of arrest and imprisonment have already been issued. We know that other people who've been trying to help the mother have had to flee the country because the retribution by the British authorities has been so severe, and what a state to get into. So, as we've seen with Melanie Shaw, does the British state, do the authorities come forward to help the victims? Absolutely not. The pressure of the state is brought to bear to close things down and cover up. So UK Column will say to people, please be very careful in your handling of material in relation to this case, because it's quite clear that the establishment is out for vengeance. And we'll say today that we have reason to believe that there is going to be a major effort to smear the testimony of these two very brave youngsters. We'll cover more on it next week in particular. I think that's it. Thanks very much for joining us, and back tomorrow.
Yep, bye.
Bye-bye.